Want to use a PGR in your cereals but have no time for a separate pass? Manipulator PGR can be applied as early as one tiller. Just add it to your herbicide to reduce lodging, increase harvest efficiency, and maximize yields. Talk to your retailer for more info and to confirm acceptable tank mixes.
All right, joining me now is Cam Dahl. He's the general manager of the Manitoba Pork Producers. Welcome here, Cam.
Good afternoon.
So, Cam, one thing I really appreciate about you is that you're a prolific writer. And as a writer, I appreciate that. And you've got an opinion. You're not afraid to write some thoughts down. And your latest op-ed that everyone can read at RealAgriculture.com really connects this idea of how farming has changed and a lot of the advancements that modernization and progress have made in agriculture, specifically linking it to environment. So let's start with sort of what prompted this particular op-ed, this topic.
Well, I think, this is an ongoing conversation we need to be having in agriculture. And so it's not just a one-off, but, there is the tendency to romanticize the little red barn. And we shouldn't be doing that. And when you have surveys of Canadians and mostly urban Canadians, and they have a high opinion of farmers and high trust in farmers, a lot of that is based on their impression of farming being a little red barn. And that's not healthy for us as an industry. And we need to talk about, not agriculture as it was in the 1950s, but agriculture as it is today, where we have advanced technologies that are helping us. Precision application of nutrients is a key example. New genetic technologies that is, helping us mitigate the impacts of climate change, drought, and excess moisture. All of those things are, they're helping to improve the financial sustainability of agriculture, but they're also significantly helping to improve the environmental sustainability of agriculture. And we don't talk about that enough. And because we don't talk about that enough, when issues come up, and here in Manitoba, Lake Winnipeg is an issue, and it's real because it turns green every summer. And that's not a good thing. And this perception of agriculture as it was in the 1950s helps drive bad policy decisions. And we need to change that. We need to change the conversation.
Now, Manitoba is one, for those who maybe aren't familiar. There's a history in Manitoba of a lot of pork production. But then, as you've mentioned, policy changes that really did stymie the hog industry. There was a significant amount of finger pointing on manure applications being the source of environmental damage. And it really did. It stalled the entire industry in some ways, really pulled it back as far as its breadth and what it could do. Where do we sit now with policy and understanding how farmers do manage their land and manage manure and manage nutrients?
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. There was, essentially a moratorium in place on building or renovating barns for about 10 years. So yes, that had a significant impact on the potential and the growth. And it had the biggest impact on the independent farmers, which, somewhat ironically, because I think the policy at the time was intended to, support the independent farmers. And of course, it did the exact opposite. I think we're in a much better place now than when we were in say, the early 2000s. I think that there's a better understanding, but better isn't necessarily good. It's better than it was, but we still have a long ways to go on that. Again, just that understanding of, I'll use, of course, I'm with the pork producers, so I'll use manure application as an example. That, the manure is applied only after extensive soil testing, and MAPS field maps produced. The product is tested before for nutrient content before it's applied. And then it's actually using near infrared technology. It's actually tested on the fly as it's being applied. And so the equipment varies the rate of application depending on the precise nutrients that are flowing into the ground. And that's precision agriculture. It's applying the nutrition where it's needed for the crop that's going to be grown. So that's a much different environmental risk than spreading manure on the ground and hoping you get it mostly right. So that's technology has come a long ways from where it was even 10 years ago, but definitely it's a different world than it was 30 years ago.
And so how then can, I mean, agriculture as a whole, but specifically, obviously, for livestock producers that are working with manure, that, there can be this perception that manure is a pollutant versus a valuable nutrient and is potentially not applied correctly. Where does that conversation happen as far as, changing the perception for customers and clients and policymakers?
Yeah, I think ultimately too, it is policymakers. And I think it's just, first off, we need to change the conversation and talk about modern agriculture. That is a starting point. And not to talk about agriculture as it was when Old MacDonald was farming. He's retired.
A long time ago. Yes.
A long time ago. Let him go. And that's the starting point is with us and to talk about the benefits of modern agriculture and modern farming. And then to have the conversation, to not be afraid to talk about it. Sometimes we are, sometimes we're, maybe we don't want to talk about manure application because it can be controversial. It shouldn't be controversial. It is a valuable source of nutrients. It's, for the most part, I'm not going to pretend that we're 100% compliant all the time, but, for the most part, it's being applied at the right place and the right rate for the right crop. And it's not being put on in a way that puts our environment at risk. And we shouldn't be afraid to talk about those things. We shouldn't be afraid to talk about GMO technology or CRISPR or all the other tools that are, again, allowing agriculture to be both financially sustainable and environmentally sustainable.
When keeping it focused on Lake Winnipeg, and some of the challenges with the algal blooms and the nutrient loading, how do you have the conversation with policymakers and diplomatically point out where a lot of these nutrients come from? Because some, of course, come before the water enters Manitoba. It does flow north. It also runs through the city of Winnipeg.
It does.
Yes. So how do you diplomatically point out?
I think again here the starting point is, and you're right, 50% of the nutrients flow into Manitoba. So they're there already before coming into the province. I think we do need to start by let's not point fingers at any of the players. I think this proposal is in the editorial. Let's bring all the players together. And look towards solutions and not just say, hey, well, it's the city of Winnipeg sewage that's causing the problem. Let's bring everybody into the room. Let's bring the First Nations into the room that are impacted, around the lake. Let's bring the municipalities into the room. Yes, the city of Winnipeg is the biggest, but they're not the only one. Let's have agriculture in the room, livestock production, grains and oilseeds production, and look at not just pointing fingers at each other, but look at real science-based solutions to the problem. I think that is a starting point because it's harder to point fingers at somebody when they're sitting across the table from it.
Isn't that the truth? And also, I think that would allow, and that does allow, what these conversations that happen in isolation, and especially with, as you've mentioned in the agriculture sphere, there are a significant amount of regulations that encompass manure applications and nutrient management planning, etc. And they are there for a reason, and they've been put in place for a reason. And I think it's important to have that conversation as well as what some of the guardrails are. So same thing with those conversations with modern technology. We have a lot of guardrails in place of using nutrients responsibly, etc.
Absolutely, we do. And can only speak for Manitoba, but you have to have a nutrient management plan. That is a requirement for manure application. You need to do soil sampling. You need to test the nutrient content of the manure. All that is a regulatory requirement. And so you're absolutely right. There are a lot of guardrails in place. And again, this gets back to the beginning of the conversation. This isn't 1950 anymore, right?
Mm-hmm. Little red barns look great on the landscape. They don't necessarily produce much. Let's put it that way.
And
So, yeah,
they're not more sustainable. Like that's
no.
the both financially or environmentally.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, Cam Dahl, with the Manitoba Pork Producers. Thank you so much. For anyone who would like to read the entire editorial, it is over on realagriculture.com. Please check it out. And Cam, thank you for joining me on the show today.
Good to see you, Lindsay.